everyone. Welcome back to Free Info Friday. I hope you all had a great week. So today's topic is going to be working during the COVID-19 pandemic. And before I go into detail, I just want to mention to you guys that I'm making this video based on today and what is known today, what I know today. So I just want to give a little disclaimer that things are changing. So if you're watching this video, make sure it's up to date. Make sure that nothing else new has changed or been passed, because there may be some different options available. And as we move on out of this coronavirus pandemic, as things start opening up, things will change and become different. So just make sure that you're paying attention to that so that you know the best option for you at the best time. So let's get started. If you're working right now and you need help now, there are emergency paid leave and emergency family sick leave available for a slew of reasons, but most generally it's if you've tested positive for COVID-19, or if someone that you care for, a dependent or adult maybe living with you, if they also have COVID-19, then you could be eligible for these programs. But let's say that you're working right now, you're considered essential, you're going into work every day. I want you to know what your employer can do. So number one, your employer must still provide you with reasonable accommodations. For example, if you have trouble seeing and you required a special screen reader prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, even during this time, your employer is still required to provide those reasonable accommodations to you, such as a screen reader or a certain type of headphones so you can talk on the phone, or things like that. There's certain reasonable accommodations that your employer still is responsible to make. With that being said, there's also some things that your employer can do that they're usually not able to. One of those being asking about your health, your medical condition. Usually the ADA, which is the American Disability Association, they prevent these employers from asking these types of questions. However, during this pandemic, there is the direct threat defense to the ADA preventing these type of questions. And the direct threat defense means that an employee is at substantial risk of significant harm to the health and safety of others in the workplace, and it cannot be eliminated through a reasonable accommodation. So like I mentioned, your employer does have to allow a reasonable accommodation for you and whatever disabilities you may have during this time or have had previously. However, if you are a direct threat to other workers, whether that be because of COVID-19 or because of some other reason, your employer does have some defense on their end to sort of ask some personal questions about your medical standpoint and your medical treatment, things like that. So some other things that your employer can do is they can ask if you've experienced some COVID-19 symptoms. The main ones that they can ask about, as of right now, like I said, make sure this video is up to date, but as of right now, things that they can ask about are what we're considering the main symptoms of COVID-19, which is dry cough, shortness of breath, fever of over 100.4, and acute respiratory disorder. So those are some things that your employer can ask about if you've experienced those things currently, or anytime that you've been at work. Your employer can also take your temperature at work. So obviously, if you have a fever, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have COVID-19, but as I said before, due to the direct threat defense that your employer has, they are able to take temperatures during this time to sort of screen out individuals and see if anybody is a risk for others. So let's say that you're working right now and unfortunately you test positive for COVID-19. It's important for you to know that under the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Hazard Association. You have to notify your coworkers. That is your responsibility. If you are tested positive for COVID-19, you have the responsibility to notify your workplace and notify your coworkers or anyone that you've come in contact with that they must be at risk. So keep in mind that is your responsibility, not the responsibility of your employer to inform others. You need to inform the people that you've come in contact with. Okay, and lastly, let's talk about returning to work after this pandemic. There are certain guidelines that we have in place. There are 5 main guidelines. So it is social distancing and protective equipment, temperature checks, sanitation, use and disinfectant of common and high traffic areas, and business travel, limit on business travel. So those are kind of the 5 guidelines that all employers across not only the state of Indiana, but likely across the nation are going to be using when they reopen the economy and businesses are reopening and people are able to leave their homes and come out. Those are the 5 guidelines that they're using, and they're going to be used throughout all phases of opening. So keep in mind, like I said before, things might change. They might develop other rules. They might find things that are more combative to detecting COVID-19 to make sure that everything's up to date and nothing has changed. I'm giving you the most recent information I have today. Like I said, that could change tomorrow or the next day or next day. Finally, one thing I wanted to touch on is if you refuse to work due to fear of getting COVID-19, what sort of remedies you have. And unfortunately, right now, there are none. So if you are refusing to work because you're fearful of getting COVID-19, there's not really any remedies for you right now other than to take emergency paid sick leave, but you may not even be eligible for that. So fear itself cannot be what's stopping you from working. So keep in mind that if that's your only reason for staying home from work, you're likely not going to be eligible for unemployment and have very little remedies. So fear itself cannot be the only reason keeping you home from work, unfortunately. So I hope that gave you all some insightful information on what to do while you're working during this COVID-19 pandemic, if you are working. I also want to say a special thank you to all those essential workers. If you're out there working right now, thank you so much for help keeping our economy running a little bit. If I do have to run to the store, I'm always wearing my protective gear. And I hope that you're doing the same. That way we're just helping everybody. The best way to get through this pandemic, I personally believe, is to do it together. So let's try to keep everyone safe and healthy. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. If you have any topics you'd like to see discussed, I'd love to hear your opinions. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel or check up on my LinkedIn and Facebook pages where my videos will be every Friday. So keep a lookout for those, and I'll check in with you guys next week. Bye.